that lived with his old mother, just the two of them. And he was not really a hero, but he was a good-hearted dreamer. And that always seemed to bring him a bit of luck. And sometimes he could act like a hero. Well, as I said, Jack lived alone with his old mother. And, so he needed some work, and he took some work from the laird, who had lately moved in. Now, this laird was the opposite of Jack. He was a mean, hard-hearted fella. And all he ever thought about was making more money, even though he was rich as Judas. But he gave Jack a job minding the sheep on the hill. And Jack, even though the laird didn't pay him much, loved this job. And it wasn't that the sheep did much. In fact, they never did much of anything interesting. But he could look from the hill down into the glen, and he could see the river that flowed through the glen. And every once in a while, a salmon would leap out of the water in a flash of silver and then go back under. And there were these tall, graceful silver birch trees that grew along the river. And they would sway in the breeze, and occasionally he could see the deer flitting amongst those trees. But Jack's favourite places was at the top of the hill, where there was a ring of old, gnarled oaks, ancient oaks. And in the middle of that ring, the oldest and most ancient one of all, its bark had twisted and grown to look like the face of an old man, an old wizard. And so the folks in that area, they called that tree Auld Cruvie. And Jack loved to lay down in the middle of the trees and listen to all the creatures that lived in the trees chatter and carry on, and listen to the wind as it blew through the trees. And he would imagine that underneath those sounds of the everyday world, he could hear the voices of those trees in the breeze. He could hear them talking about all the ancient mysteries and all the things that had happened in days past. Jack, he knew that the world was full of magic and wonder if you just know where to look for it. So one day, and it was about midsummer, he sees his old mum coming up the hill, and she's always coming up to visit him. In fact, she liked to gather the wool that the sheep dropped or caught on bushes to make little things of. And that was about the only interesting thing, those sheep ever did. And this day she's coming with Jack's lunch. It's some bannocks and cheese, and they're having a nice wee picnic there on the side of the hill. And she says, "Oh, Jack, I have something I made for you." And she takes out this robe that she had knitted. It's got 12 loops in it, and besides that, it is invisible. Now, Jack's mother, she had some mad skills, but I guess he was used to it. So he just takes the rope and he puts it in his satchel and hangs it on his favourite bush. But his mum's not done. She says, "Jack, this is very important. Last night I had a dream. I dreamed that those oak trees at the top of the hill got up out of the earth and began dancing. And this minded me of a tale that my mother and father used to tell, that every 70 years on Midsummer Night, the trees come out and dance. And I think that's what the dream means, that those trees are going to dance tonight, Jack. And underneath those trees, there's treasure, gold and silver and jewels. Now, Jack, if you're a mind to get the treasure, only take a little bit. Don't be greedy. Just what you think you might need. For if you take too much, I can't tell, but I think that something evil might betight you." And Jack says, "Okay, Mum, that's good advice." And then he waved bye to his mum. She's off down the hill. And he's, looking at those oaks, wondering if they're really going to rise up and dance. When all of a sudden he feels a chill down the back of his spine. He turns around and it's the laird. And the laird says, "So, Jack, I know that you are listening to those birds." He says, "Aye." He says, "The birds told you anything?" He says, "Well, the birds haven't told me anything yet, but I'll let you know if they do." And the laird goes off. But Jack is, of course, a little bit unsettled by this encounter. And a little bit after that, as it's starting to get towards the gloaming, just before sunset, the birds do rise up out of the trees, and they begin chitter and chattering all at once. And of course, Jack has spent so much time on this hillside, he can understand the language of the birds. And he says, "Hi, where are you going?" And one of the little robins says, well, these trees are going to be up and dancing tonight, and they'll be shaking us out of our homes, so we're going off to spend the night someplace else, but we'll be back tomorrow, bye-bye." And Jack says, "Well then, that's it then." And he feels the chill at his back again. It's the laird. And the laird said, "What did those birds say to you? Those birds spoke to you, didn't they?" He said, "Oh aye, they said that they're going to dance tonight." And the laird says, "Right, I've heard those stories. There's treasure underneath the trees. I'm going to come back. And I'm going to bring me a big sack, and I'm going to get muckle treasure." And so he goes off, and Jack is thinking about all this, and the sun is beginning to set, and the stars are beginning to rise, and he starts to hear this beautiful music floating in the breeze, and the music almost lulls him to sleep, laying there on the hillside, when he hears the crack of a twig, and it's the laird. And the laird says, "Jack." And he can see the laird's knife glinting in the moonlight. And the laird says, "Jack, that birth spot of Auld Cruvie, of the biggest tree of all, when it gets up and dances, that's mine, and I don't want you coming near it." And Jack says, "Oh no, I had no mind to go to that birth spot. It's all yours." So as the music goes on, the trees do begin to pull themselves out of the earth, grasping like their roots were arms. They hoist themselves up. And then, with the roots as if they were big stumpy legs, they begin lumbering down the hill. And from the bottom of the hill, from the river, those tall, slender, silver birches have come out of their places too, and they're swaying and dancing up the hill. And in the middle of the hillside, the oaks and the birches meet together, and they put their arms around to each other, and they bow to each other like lords and ladies, and they dance. They twirl round and round in a beautiful slow dance to that music. And Jack, he thinks that he's never seen anything so wonderful in his life, and he could watch it forever. But then he hears the laird. He's jumped into Auld Cruvie's birth spot, and he's stuffing that huge sack full of treasure, and he's muttering to himself, "Gold, silver, jewels, treasure." And Jack says, "Well, I better get a bit of that treasure for myself." And so he goes to the birth spot of the smallest tree, and he, just steps in. It's not very deep. And he looks around for some likely things, and he picks up a twist of silver, a staff of silver that's encrusted with pearls, and he sticks it under his arm. And then he picks up a gold goblet that's got emeralds and rubies on it, and he puts that into his sack as well. And then he spies 2 rings that are linked together. They're of gold, and they're cunningly shaped to look like the twigs that are in a circle and the leaves coming off them. He puts that in his pocket. But then when he tries to climb up it out of the hole, it is as if he's sunk deeper into the earth. And the more he tries to get a handhold or a foothold, the moist earth just crumbles underneath him. He's beginning to panic. "I don't know if I can get out of this place," when he hears, "Hello, Jack! Hello, Jack!" Oh, it's Mary. She's the servant girl up at the castle, which works for the laird, and she's kind of sweet on Jack. And he says, Mary, I'm stuck here in this hole. Run and get my satchel. There's an invisible rope in there that my mommy knit, and I want you to throw that down to me to get me out." So Mary goes and she gets the invisible rope, and she throws it down, and she pulls him up. And of course they get up, and they see that the trees have finished their dancing, and the oak trees are beginning to lumber back up the hill. So they run to the birth spot of Auld Cruvie, and they're calling down to the laird, "Come on, you've got to get out, the trees are coming back, come on!" But his ears are stuffed up with greed, and he can't hear them. He's just going, "Gold, silver, jewels, they're coming so close. They just run, Mary and Jack, and they go into the bushes and they lay down on their bellies and they watch the trees lower themselves back into their holes. And the music that had been playing stopped. Well, nobody ever heard of that laird again. And his nephew, who has turned out to be quite a nice fellow and not greedy, came and took over for him, and everyone was happy about that. And Jack, well, he sold that silver staff with the pearls on it and the golden goblet with the emeralds and rubies. He sold them for a nice sum of money, and he bought himself a good little cottage with 3 bedrooms at the bottom of the hill, and he bought himself those sheep that never did anything really interesting, but now they were his, and he bought himself a milk cow. And the rings that he'd got, the 2 rings, well, he took the smaller one and he asked Mary if she would marry him. And when she said yes, he took the other one for himself so that he would remember his promises to her. And so they lived happily ever after. Mary and Jack and Jack's old mum in the little cottage, which of course is the proper way to live. But they never forgot to look for the magic and wonder. And that's the story of Auld